From Wakefield, it's the Nolan Car Night Show, starring Nolan, where you join Nolan's guest this week, Chris Farmer, to the show. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here's Nolan.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the program. And joining me this week is a very special person. He's not only talented musically, singing, he's been with the Beach Boys, Jan&Dean. He currently plays with Timothy B Schmit. He plays with CSI. Surf City All-Stars. So much he does. He's such a busy man, so to spend time with me means a great deal. He's the one and only Mr. Chris Farmer. Chris, how are you doing today?
Hello, everybody. Thanks, Nolan. I appreciate the invite.
Of course.
Oh, you keep talking about my credits. No, go ahead. No. Go ahead.
As I mentioned earlier, I like to sort of talk about right now, and obviously these are interesting times, crazy times, and you're back out touring, whether it be with Bobby's band or your own stuff or with Timothy's. How's it been for you to get back out touring again?
Well, almost 2 years ago, the lockdown started happening. You know, the virus was spreading, and I remember I had dates on the calendar like any other professional live musician, which is how we all make our living. And all of a sudden, I remember one morning, my wife said, "Chris, they're shutting down restaurants." And I'm thinking, well, I do a little bit of work in restaurants and some high-end hotels up and down Southern California here, and Palm Springs, San Diego. And I thought, wow, that's unusual. And I called a few of the agents, and they said, yeah, things are locking down. And then we all went into a deep, dark depression. We're lucky to still be alive, right? Because that's our living.
Sure.
And we not only, people come up, hey, we really appreciated that version of this song. It brings back memories. We're used to that instant feedback being performers, right? And then all of a sudden that goes away, and you go, gee. So we bought a lot of puzzles, right? We did a lot of puzzles at home. I have a couple of grandkids, small still, under 6. A boy and a girl, so we're doing this and that a couple times a week, and just trying to get through. Things started opening up for us in June of 2020. Wow. If you can believe that, even though California is one of the more stricter states to do the lockdown, I started working again, and then the following year, we started flying to where the more states were open. Right? I mean, that makes sense. Everybody was thirsty for live music. And then it shut down again a little bit, right, last winter. But, what happens, it's always been feast or famine in terms of being a live performer. And then all of a sudden, boom, the phone starts ringing. All your partners, we've got a little circuit of partners. We're all out looking for work. We bring in a deal. We say, hey, is everyone available? Or if not, we'll split the band, all this kind of fun stuff. So all of a sudden, the calendar's good, and we're ready to go. And but yeah, the first 9 months or so, it was interesting. We did a private party in a backyard here in Orange County, California, where I live. And the hostess said, you know what? We're going to have this party. And if people feel comfortable coming to the party in our backyard, my friends, if they don't, then that's fine too. And I go, wow, I kind of appreciate that point of view. Let everybody figure it out for themselves. Sure. But of course, that's just how it goes. So we're definitely back in action in terms of, I think full-time calls and inquiries, and trying to keep the calendar filled.
For you, I mean, you've been playing for a while now, so I'm sure, although you may still have nerves playing, but when you first got back out during these times, was there any sort of nerves of like, man, am I going to really be able to still continue to do this? Am I going to have any, rust on this? Or was it just, you got back out and, things were full swing?
No, I've been lucky. I can do these songs. There's a handful of us that if we haven't played in 3-4 months, we can just stand on stage, put the guitar on and just start going at it. A few of the guys said, oh no, I haven't played these songs in a while. Let me blow off the rust. I better piano or drums or whatever. But no, it just comes back. I'm very lucky. I can remember lyrics and melodies and chord changes, and we just jump back into the saddle.
Now, I want to, after talking about COVID, and that's, for another time, I don't want to make it all about that because that's depressing and whatnot, but I want to sort of go from the beginning and start with you from there. Growing up in Michigan, after reading on your online on your website, whatnot about yourself, what was your relationship like with music in terms of not just listening to it, but also potentially doing it as a career? Was that something feasible for you?
There's a lot of musicians I found out that had kind of escaped the Midwest during that time period. I just turned 60-ish, but back in the late 70s, we were all going to school. There's some guys that ended up here that are doing great things. And I followed out a friend's older brother who had a record deal on Casablanca Records, which of course is defunct, but in the late 70s. So I thought, wow, something's going on in Los Angeles. Detroit doesn't really have a whole lot of opportunity. You can either play in the bars from 9 to 2, 5 nights a week, maybe. That's what it was. You could do some voiceover work and some acting, but there's not a lot of corporate event opportunities, which is where you can make a decent wage as a musician or in the event business. So I headed out west when I was 19 and was really lucky. It's timing, right? Nolan, it's timing in terms of the groups that had hits in the 60s. All of a sudden, we're being asked back to the fair and festival circuit. Corporate events were still in the infant stage. But all these groups, and I put my name into a musician's contact service right there on Hollywood Boulevard in Hollywood. Someone said, "Hey, go down. That's where I get work." And I started getting calls. Jan&Dean called. "Hey, we're in between. We need a bass player. You're a singing bass player." See, the key is they all needed singers because they all had all those harmonies, right? Yeah. And so I got the job with Jan&Dean, and then I meet members of the Beach Boys. I meet the Turtles, and then through another thing, I played with Gary Lewis and played with a bunch of other acts. But in terms of musicians who are looking to expand their avenues, being a singer really does help with the pop music stuff. So that's how I got out to LA and just started working with various groups.
I know, and through the people that I've had on, that whether it be athletes or people from sports media and whatnot, if you're very successful at something, I'm sure it replicates with music. From an early age, this is what you want to do, this is what you want to have done. Unfortunately, sometimes parents, on the other hand, may already have an idea of what they want you to do and may not want you to do whatever your dreams are. How supportive were your parents growing up with your music endeavors when you realized this is what you want to do?
Oh, my parents were real supportive, and I grew up in a musical family. My grandfather was a professional musician. His wife taught harp in Michigan, and then moved down to Miami, taught University of Miami. Her husband is a very famous, or second husband, I should say, after my grandfather, very famous band director from Indiana. So we had music coming out the ears. Grandpa would come over on his Sunday afternoons and bring a bunch of toys for us kids, percussion toys, meaning percussion, bongos, all this kind of stuff. Ukuleles showed up when we were 3-4 years old. So we're strumming the little ukulele because we could get our hands around it. Then I switched to piano. My parents were so encouraging. My dad always wanted to be a pro, but knew it's a hard lifestyle, like his father. His father was a professional trombone player, played in the 30s and 40s, big bands, and then played with the Detroit Symphony as he retired for 20 years. So music was always encouraged. And myself and my youngest brother, 5 years younger than me, we're both professional musicians. The middle ones were smart enough to go into business. So they were, the middle siblings, but the two lunkheads, me and the younger one, we persisted.
But hey, you look at it like this, though. I mean, yourself, your other siblings might have gone to business, but I mean, they never got to play with the Beach Boys. They never got to play with Jan&Dean. You lucked out. Now, being that you're from Michigan, and I know you're not an Ohio State sports fan at all. Your head coach of Michigan football, Jim Harbaugh, has been there for a few years. I'm curious, as a Michigan Wolverines sports fan, how can you assess? Because I want to ask this quickly. How have you assessed his job so far, and almost the potential of going to Minnesota?
Wow, I like that. We're going to sports and college sports. I got to sing with Jim. He showed up at one of our gigs when he was the quarterback in Indianapolis, and he said, the Barbara Ann with the Beach Boys. Everybody's invited up, especially all the cute girls. Look at the cute girls. But then whoever's there, the celebrities. So Jim and I got to sing on the mic, but I mean, Tom Brady's our quarterback for Michigan too. Yeah. I mean, it's Harbaugh, he came back to our alma mater. We had high hopes, right? 7-8 years ago. Things didn't go as planned, but all of a sudden this year we kicked some butt, made it to the championship. So we're all for Jim Harbaugh, and it looks like he's staying, the latest I read.
Yeah.
So it was wonderful. I have great memories of that, being on that campus. My sophomore year, I was close enough to walk to the games, and it's a beautiful campus, Ann Arbor, Michigan, and just great memories. So I'm a Michigan fan for life, which I guess that means I won't root for the Buckeyes, but that's that rivalry, right?
That's the rivalry. And my state of Rhode Island, I go to the state school at the University of Rhode Island. There's a school in Providence called obviously Providence College, and Providence is usually the better school in basketball. And this year, my school hasn't done too well in college basketball for the men's, but the other school, PC, has done very well. They're ranked. They're going to be in the NCAA tournament probably. And it's the rivalry. You can't root for them, although you want to, because in your state. I want to talk about your time at University of Michigan. And I know Charlie Watts, the famous drummer, although he's passed away, mentioned in an interview how he really wanted to, in order to be better, because, he is so melancholy and doesn't like to brag and stuff. He talked about how he's really not a drummer because he never really had lessons to learn or go to professional school to play. How much of your time at University of Michigan with the music program helped you in terms of advancing faster than others?
It helped me tremendously. It's a great music school. I remember thinking I wasn't quite a good fit for them. I was being pulled toward pop and rock and wanting to do more commercial. And they were very strict at that time. They still kind of looked down their nose at even jazz music. It was strictly classical and opera. And so I was there as a vocal music major, singing the opera songs, learning how to be a pro. And they said, now, underclassmen, we don't usually cast them in our big opera productions until their voice gets more mature. I'm thinking, gee, I was all fired up to be a performer. So I lasted a few years in the program, and it was very nice. They gave me a full ride. They wanted me to come through the Interlochen Music Camp, which when I met Bruce Johnson all those years ago, we discovered we went to the same camp.
Wow.
Camp in northern Michigan. That's pretty famous for music. Bruce went when he was growing up in Chicago, 20 years before I did. And then I went in the late 70s, mid 70s when I'm a kid, a teenager. And so it's just through that great music camp up at near Traverse City, Michigan, and the Michigan School of Music. Wonderful stuff. But I was either headed to New York to sing opera or the tug of rock and roll out to Los Angeles. And I already lived where New York was the same weather.
Sure.
See, what happened was every New Year's Day, we'd watch the Rose Bowl, freezing our butts off. And the next day or the next 30 days, there'd be 30 or 40,000 dumb kids driving west, right? I got to get out of this place. And of course, you see the palm trees in Pasadena. Yeah. And of course, it looks so warm, right? You're in Rhode Island, you're freezing. Yeah. And so that was one of the reasons I said, I kind of figured out I'd end up in Los Angeles rather than New York City. And I think I chose wisely, as they say in Indiana Jones.
Yes. Yes. I can tell it seems as though, I'm sure it's warm up there right now. We have snow out here still a little bit, so it's not that enjoyable getting that freezing car in the morning, but that's life. You have to deal with it. Seeing as though, before you joined, obviously, when you left University of Michigan, you didn't jump right with Jan&Dean. I'm sure you worked in other bands up until that point. How much for you was it a learning experience of those early bands you're with after school, in the sense of realizing this is where I have to be, this is what I have to go through in order to make it to that next level? Was it an easy for you, or just, a full force of enjoyment?
Every situation we're in goes on to the next one. Everyone. I auditioned around Los Angeles for various groups. It's funny, I ended up, my go-to songs, they said, Chris, you're a singer, right? Why don't you sing a few songs? My go-to songs for the audition back in 1980, 81 was Take It Easy by the Eagles and Back in the USSR by the Beatles. And, those are easy songs to sing. Those are songs so well written. they make you sound better than you are.
Sure.
Okay. Right? If you know what I mean. And so you got to pick songs that are strong. But I played with groups. The groups were working 5-6 nights a week in the Los Angeles circuit. Stuart Anderson's Black Angus. I played with numerous groups there. It was just wonderful to get. But one time in terms of the fit, I remember back in the clubs in Detroit, you did 4 sets only, 9-1. Out in Los Angeles, it's 9-1:30, 9-1:45. I remember complaining to the leader once. You mean we got to play till 1:30? We're playing four 45-minute sets and then another 30. We don't do, I'm 19 years old. I'm complaining like an idiot, right? Like a dumb kid. And excuse me. And I'm bitching and moaning to the leader. That's not the way it was back, where I'm from. He said, "Hey man, you're in Los Angeles now." So it's supply and demand, right? Yeah. There's such a pool of musicians out here in Los Angeles that they can kind of be taken advantage of. Hey, you're going to make $75, $100 a man. You got to play that extra set. You go do it or you don't. So anyway, it was kind of a learning curve for me. Yeah. And it still is every situation I go to. I have a house party I'm flying up to in Vail for this Saturday night. And I didn't know exactly what kind. I brought it in for the guys, rounded up the guys, and they wanted classic rock. Well, that's quite a big genre, classic rock. Yeah. So I put together a list of what I thought would be nice, early 70s, vocal stuff, of course, because that's what we all do. Crosby, Stills, Nash, Allman Brothers, a little Southern rock, a little that. And then I heard from the event planner, hey, the owner really doesn't know, or I'm sorry, the buyer really doesn't know anything past the 1960s and they want to dance. I thought, okay, throw that set list out, go back to the 60s, Stones, So it's always a learning curve. Sure. Even when you're it's case by case. It's a gig by gig. So
now I asked this to the Bobby Figgs when I had him on, and then Gary Griffin. Right. You joined.
Oh yeah, Gary too. Good, yeah. Great.
He's very nice and very personable and very down to earth. And so is Bobby. Right. But when you joined Jan&Dean 1980, that's I would think a big adjustment in terms of going from the circuit and playing with these smaller bands. How do you explain to your bandmates at that time that, hey, I'm trying out for Jan&Dean, and then you actually make it, and then you're going on tour?
Well, that was fun. We never knew for sure. I was one of 30 bass players they looked at. And then it's just like an actor, all of a sudden you're down to 15, you get a call back, a third call back, 4 call back. And then I learned a lot about politics when I was a 20-year-old kid auditioning for Jan&Dean, because there's 2 partners, Jan and Dean. Yeah. They own the band. So whoever Jan wanted, Dean necessarily did not want that guy. Whoever Dean wanted, which is me, Jan didn't necessarily. So they kept saying, Chris, you're down to 1, you're down to 2. The 2 dudes, the other guy and myself, we actually were called for a final callback, sitting there, by ourselves, chatting away. I mean, it's just one of those goofy things. Dean ended up saying, Jan, they compromised. They said, Jan, you hire the drummer, but I want the bass player because we need his voice. So they hired me. And thankfully, I just thanked them. It was 40 years ago. I mean, it's amazing how time flies. And you're talking to Gary and Bobby and the rest of the guys. Sure. It's like, you'd think it's just yesterday, but you go, oh no, it's been a little. But to go to families. Well, I'm auditioning for Jan&Dean. It looks like I got the date. We're supposed to go to Australia in a few months, and then that got canceled. Wow. He said because the buyer, Willie Nelson, just went to Australia, and he only collected half, and the buyer didn't come up with the other half. Really? So we're not going to chance it. I said, okay, fine. I go, well, so I kept playing in the clubs, being on call with Jan&Dean. They put me on a retainer. I was paying my bills, but Chris, go out and do whatever you usually do in LA, and we'll let you know when we start work. So finally they started up that next year. Gary Griffin came into the band, thank goodness, as our keyboard player, because he had just got off the road at the Beach Boys. He knew all the stuff. He was kind of our musical director with the guitar player, and off we went. So but with the family thing, it's like, well, they go, Jan&Dean, not the biggest fan base in Detroit, Michigan for Jan&Dean. For the Beach Boys, of course. Yeah. But dump that dumb thing. Anyway, again, the family were all supportive. Whoever I want to work with, they're fine. So they had to look up Jan&Dean, right? At that time, no internet. So you go to the encyclopedia, you go to the record store. I found an old record of Jan&Dean. When I found out it was a remake, I didn't know. I thought, oh, this is what these guys sound like. Well, wait a minute. That's not what the leader hands me a cassette. Here's the songs we're going to play, Chris. Why don't you guys learn them, and we'll see you next week, and we'll start working the song. I thought, oh, these are different songs than the record I bought. So it was a learning curve for sure.
What was that like? I wanted to ask you that, the turnaround in terms of learning the set list. Was it a fast turnaround, or is it something where they give you a little bit of time to learn and then, make sure you know it? Oh,
sure. A little bit of time. And we weren't sure when the next show, as soon as the show's booked, then boom, everybody's on the ball. We got to have a show in 30 days or 45 days. We were lucky that one year where work trickled in for Jan&Dean. It was 1981, and work trickled in. A couple of shows out in Palm Desert, a couple other shows in the local area, drive out, drive back. So I got to get my feet wet as their new bass player and background singer. And then all of a sudden I was told, boom, the tour's on. From May through October, we're going to be out. ICM, big agency, just booking. We did sheds, we did huge arenas and theaters. But what really helped was we did 2 weeks in the same venue up at Lake Tahoe. And then we did 2 weeks in the same venue in Reno, Nevada. So that's where people who were running the Jan&Dean thing, knowing there's a new band. Let's have you sit down at 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there, get the show prepared, because Jan Barry is mentally impaired, from his accident from 15 years prior. And so let's just make sure Jan's ready to go. The new guys in the band are ready to go. So that really helped out a lot, just being able to do 2 shows a night at the Harrah's at Tahoe, Harrah's Reno, and get the show on when the tour officially started in June, when we're doing a lot of one-nighters.
For you, growing up, I'm sure you had a fandom of the Beach Boys and then Jan&Dean. Jan&Dean, 1980, 81, they'd been around for some time. So from your perspective, joining them at that time, what was your viewpoint on them?
Excuse me. I have kind of a weird story about that. The road manager called me in my apartment in Hollywood, said, Chris, I got your name from the Musicians Contact Service. Jan&Dean are looking for a bass player. Then his question is, have you heard of them? Right? Because he knew it's 1980. The guys haven't been on the radio for a while, but they did a TV movie. They're getting some interest. The Beach Boys were helping them get back on tour, introducing them to agents and buyers and whatnot. And so I'm thinking, after the fact, the road manager is probably calling a lot of young bass players who are on this roster. And somebody must have said, well, tell me who they are. So my answer to that was no, I had not heard of them. I'm 19. I'm from Detroit. I don't know. Who's Jan&Dean? He said, no problem. They did a song called Surf City. Have you heard of that? I said, no. I'm listening to Bob Seger and Alice Cooper from Detroit, right? Motown. Smokey Robinson. I'm listening to the Stations and the Tops. I don't know. I said, no. He said, well, Dead Man's Curve is another one of their big hits. I said, no. And then he said, well, there's also a song called The Little Old Lady from Pasadena. I said, yes, I know that one because it's on a Beach Boys record.
Yeah.
He said, well, that's this music they do. They were friends with the Beach Boys. They have all these harmonies, and we're looking for a singing play. I said, I love that music. I'd love to come down. And I went, oh my gosh, did I blow it by saying I've never heard of them?
Yeah.
And then I went to a few friends. They said, I bought the stupid knockoff album. I go, okay, that's what they are. So anyway, yeah, you're right. The age thing was really crazy. And eventually they gave me, the music, and off we went. So
I'm sure for you to have spent that much time with Jan&Dean was definitely a relief in terms of you have made it and you don't have to worry about necessarily if you're going to be able to survive and make it week to week, but also speaks to the trust that Jan&Dean both had in your ability, but also that they saw that you were a pretty good player as well.
We had a great time. I was in and out of the Jan&Dean band for the next 15 years, doing other things. I say, guys, I'm doing this with this other guy or this thing. Please give me a call. But if I might not be available every once in a while, don't take it personally. What do? You try to keep your calendar filled. Jan&Dean had just enough work where you wanted to clear the calendar for them during the summer and the fall. But on the off season, it's like, well, okay, you have to piece things together. But it was a wonderful experience. And I'm working with Dean Torrance to this day. He's in his early 80s. There's a few of us who he's been given permission to shop him as an add-on or as a headliner. And I field some calls for Dean. So Dean's still out there doing the music. It's wonderful.
God bless him. Similar, I'm sure, to the other guys like Brian and Al, who still are out there, still performing to this day with their
it's amazing
dates. Now, similar to Gary, you spent some time playing with another well-known musician and actor and his bands on television and on the scene. John Stamos with his bands on General Hospital and Full House, Blackie and the Riff Raff and Jesse and the Rippers. Was that something that you were looking to do at all during your time in the entertainment/music world? And was that something that you could adjust to easily?
No, guys like me just go with the flow. You think, do I want to be interested in this? John is a super fan of the Beach Boys, always was. He was a kid. And so he shows up. We had a residency gig, one of my groups, right after Jan&Dean did their 1981 tour. And then Jan had some substance problems. Dean sends him to rehab. I don't know if we're ever going to get back together. We had that great tour. Okay, well, what do we do now? So the backup band with Jan&Dean put together a residency gig at Knott's Berry Farm amusement park and theme park in Orange County. And John Stamos would show up, as a kid, a fan.
Yeah.
Hi, you guys doing Beach Boys? You can, and then eventually, can I sit in? I'm a drummer. And I was like, I'm not the leader of the group, but eventually we let John sit in. He was starting to get traction as an actor.
Yeah.
And we just hooked up from then on. I mean, it was just the funniest thing.
I mean, just to, I'm sure, see that and see the fast growth of craziness that he brought from fans is just, I'm sure, an unbelievable thing, because then it takes away, I'm sure, some aspect from performing.
Well, a little bit, but it's just exciting. John said, "Guys, I'm going to start booking gigs. I want you to be our band. So let's put together a set list. We'll rehearse a few times, and then we'll go do this stuff." He said, but it is funny. I do remember one of his things early on. He said, "Chris, they want to pay me to go do a meet and greet. And it's like being in a meat market. I got to stand there for an hour and a half. That's what those guys have to do." And he said, "I'd much rather do a concert. So I'm trying to get these guys, not only I'll sign autographs, whatever, but let me do my music as well." And so we were lucky enough to be invited by John into his musical project. And then each TV show that he would do, he'd invite us to be in the band. It was so fun. We did the General Hospital run with him, the soap opera. We did a little bit of his other TV show, Dreams, which I didn't think lasted very well. We didn't do the Jack Klugman thing, but and then of course Full House. Early on, I was, one of the band guys, and we'd either sing or play. And then they invite me to record. I think there's one show where I sang something, but Scott Baio was on the show. It was my voice and Scott mimicked that stuff. We were all asked to help, make it sound good. And then of course, John, I was so lucky to just be one of the guys invited into that. And we still do stuff every once in a while. And then John still, of course, is out with the Beach Boys.
Yeah.
His first love of rock and pop music's great.
Yeah, sure. And he sings. I haven't seen them, which is unfortunate on my end to not have gone to go see them. But he sings probably my favorite, if not one of my favorite, Beach Boys songs ever, which is Dennis's classic "Forever."
Right.
I'm curious, being that as I mentioned, you played with the Beach Boys for a while as well. What was the timeline between Jan&Dean and the Beach Boys? I know you joined them in '95, but how much of a time space was there between both?
Well, I finished the Jan&Dean tour that summer, and I asked Dean. I said, "I think I need to take a step back. I'm getting a little in a rut here, and I'm kind of a grumpy Gus out here on the road." I was kind of Jan's road manager, and he and I weren't seeing eye to eye to a few things. I said, Dean, I probably need to step aside. And in the meantime, for years on the side, I had a sweet deal with Mike Love of the Beach Boys.
Oh, hey.
We did a lot of corporates in the winter and the spring. In the summer, they'd go do the Beach Boys, the main band with Carl and Al. And
sure.
Right. But then on the side, Mike would be hiring different musicians to do invisible dates, corporate events for companies. And I was doing that. So I officially got released from Jan&Dean. A couple weeks later, I called Mike Love. I said, Mike, I knocked on the door. If there's ever a personnel change, I wanted to let you know I'm no longer working for Jan&Dean. He said, what do you mean you're not working for Jan&Dean? I said, I just needed a break and everything. And so Mike was nice enough to hire me on into the main band of the Beach Boys in '95 when there was a personnel change. So very lucky, a little bit of timing. I chatted with, I just did shows with Ed Carter, who I came in to replace in the bass chair. And Ed was so nice when he said, hey, I'll get you up to speed on whatever you need to do when you're taking over. And it's time for me to take a break from the road and be with my family. And then when I left the Beach Boys 12 years later, my old buddy Randall Kirsch stepped in. He went from guitar to bass. I said, Randall, you need any help? We're all just
sure.
Like, oh no, I've been let go, I've been fired, whatever. It's like that's the way it goes. That's the nature of the beast,
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about Ed and Randall a little bit, but it's similar to how I asked about Jan&Dean, who had mentioned how you didn't really know of them, and obviously you're a fan of the Beach Boys, and in '95 they had been around for nearly or a little over 30 years. What did your image at all or viewpoint of them change at all from when you were growing up listening to them to when you joined them, or was it sort of the still boyhood appreciation?
You get to know people, you live with them, you travel with them. Sometimes you get to know them a little too well, right?
Yeah.
No, just like anything else. And so it's always, you always have to put that. It's quite a pressure cooker being on tour with the Beach Boys.
Sure.
It really is. There's some politics involved that everyone has to be aware of or not. Our good friend, Mike Maros, who passed a while back, just a wonderful man and one fantastic B3 and keyboard player. Mike just said, Chris, when I came in, he said, Chris, I just keep my head down. I don't want to, just let me go do my job. I said, what great advice from Mike.
Yeah.
Go out there, do your job for the sake of the music, for the sake of the recordings. Everything else is superfluous. Don't worry about any of that other stuff. And so Mike really helped out when I got the job. But there's definitely stuff, it's like, and it's just like any other corporation. I have a lot of friends that work for Disney, a lot of friends. And sometimes there's two inside where the magic rubs off a bit. It's just all corporate stuff.
Sure.
And so to put it in perspective, I'm out here playing the greatest music ever written. I'm saying they even throwing me a couple of lead songs for crying out loud. Chris, you want to sing this? You want to sing the Cottonfield song? You want to sing You're So Good to Me? Whatever. You want to sing some of the songs that Al sings that Al's no longer with the main tour? I said, whatever you guys, right? Whatever you need me to do, I'm that's what I'm here for. And so when you're let go, it's like, well, it's kind of like the president's cabinet. You serve the pleasure of the Beach Boys.
Yeah.
You're brought in, you serve at their pleasure. How can I be of assistance?
Yeah.
How can I help? And then all of a sudden you're no longer needed. Well, then no longer needed. And that's the way of the world.
When you joined them, and Bobby has mentioned this, and I asked this to Gary, everyone I'm sure gets the Carl Wilson stare when they join the band, when they mess up. When was the first time you got the Carl Wilson stare, if that happened at all?
I got the stare at rehearsal once when we were rehearsing Darling. The stare happened. We weren't even into the first verse, and Carl stops the whole band. Stop! We all have in-ear monitors, so instead of we're all concentrating. So he yells "stop" into the microphone, so we could all hear. Right? He turns to the bass player, turns to me, and said, "Farmer, what are you playing?" Oh no, here it comes. It's my turn. Shakedown Crew. I start playing the bass part to Darling. Right? 2 measures, 3 measures in. He says, "Stop! That's wrong. That's wrong." And so we played the whole song while I'm sitting there melting, played the whole song on bass. And he was letting me know, look, kid, Mike Love introduced you to us. He brought you in, no problem. But I want to tell you, I hear everything that goes on stage. I really understand. I know every part, which he did, especially one of my songs that I sing, especially the bass. And it's so funny because the bass part, then when I listened to it and got it, the bass part is modeled after the Motown bass player, James Jamerson. There's hits that go on, musically speaking. There's some anticipations that go on that I didn't quite get. And I go, oh. But the important thing was Carl's running the show.
Yeah.
Musical director. And if you can't cut the mustard musically, then sorry, Charlie, we're going to, you're not going to be around much longer. And the best part about working for Carl Wilson is he was such a nice man, and the way he did it was so smooth. You really wanted to please him. That's the key. Carl was just in another plane musically. And when he would turn around and give you that look, like, hey, something's going on back there. I don't know. Right. Everyone snapped to attention. It's like, oh, we're getting a little loose. We're having, we're not playing to the leader's satisfaction. So, oh yeah, I got the stink eye. Definitely.
well, I know that, it's well known that, after Brian left, Carl, took over and he became the sort of de facto leader. Then, in the 90s, Mike, took more of a role as well. In 95, when you joined, what was it like? And you sort of alluded to it then, experiencing Carl, who had started with the group when he was 14, 15 years old, and now he's got this voice that's unbelievable still after 30 years. Was he still, a powerful person in the sense of, making sure we're cracking whip? Because if you're not, you're out.
Yes, that was understood. He didn't even have to do anything other than practice a few things or something's getting loose on this one song, that song. Carl was so consistent in his voice. We used to compare him to like Roy Orbison.
Oh,
You never heard Roy Orbison crack his voice, going from low register, mid register to high, back and forth. And Carl was that smooth. The only time I heard Carl crack was very sad. It was after his second cancer rounds, and he was still out touring, doing the best he could. But he cracked a note in God Only Knows, which of course is his amazing song, right? He cracked the note, and we all heard it, and we go, well, I wonder, what he did after he cracked the note in front of the audience? He laughed at him. So he just laughed. He said, he's laughing, continue the song. That was Carl. Is just amazing. Wow. And then he left the tour that end of summer, wanted to come back for a fall run, ended up not, and then passed away early that year. It's just devastating for everybody.
When you're in, I don't know if we just mentioned again, if you can't, cut the mustard, you're out. When you're in that position, whether it's a Jan&Dean situation or a Beach Boys situation or anyone else that you've played with that's well known, how do you deal with the situation of, I like this group, I like the music that they're playing, I'm a big fan, but I have to keep that in because if I let that out and let it explode, I'm going to embarrass someone or myself and I'm going to be, out of a job. Is that hard to do?
No, when you're in the nuts and bolts of preparing a song, you concentrate and you focus, and you kind of, you're being a big fan just kind of takes a back seat. But every once in a while, especially for certain songs, like for me, it was California Girls. I don't know why. All of a sudden, I become a fan during that song. And I realize I'm standing on stage with the Beach Boys, or like a hometown gig back at a big amphitheater, the Pine Knob Amphitheater in Detroit, where I got to play many times after that, but went to see all my favorite groups in the 70s. And now I'm back there playing with the Beach Boys and a couple other acts. It just hits you every once in a while. I said, I'm playing with these guys. I'm a huge fan. But yeah, you're right. You got to keep it in, do your job, because you're there to help them sound as best as they can. You're not there to satisfy some crazy, fan you have. But there's a time and place for that. Sometimes at the hotel, you can chat. Bruce loved to talk about, he was a big fan, of course. He was he was doing production for the Beach Boys, and he loves telling his story. Carl turned to him, said, Bruce, Brian wants to stay home and record with the Wrecking Crew, and we're still on the road. Do you have anybody? Can you recommend somebody? Will you play bass? Why don't you come in and play bass? Bruce, we all love those stories where we've been invited. And it's like, wow, okay. And we're all super fans. So yeah, you're right. What do? You just, you do your job.
When you had mentioned Ed Carter, who you took over for, and then Randall Kirsch, who took over for you when he came in. When you joined in 95, Billy was there or he had just left, and then Ed was there and then just left, and Mike Maros, and then you have Mike Kowalski, who was probably besides Ed is the longest serving supporting cast member on there. When you're joining that group, or I don't want to say replacing because that's not the right word, but when you're taking over for them, is there sort of a fear in the sense of making sure you're keeping that high quality of musicianship that they brought to those songs?
Sure, absolutely. You look at these guys and how long they've been with the group. I mean, Billy's a relative. He sang on Barbara Ann. I mean, on the recording, he was in the studio hanging out with everybody. It's like, oh my gosh. And he was a professional musician by the time he was 1965, 66 with the boys down the street, right? Dino Desi. So yeah, it's an intimidation thing. You just do the best you can and hope you're doing the job.
99 was a big year for the group, as well as yourself. You're become the new musical director for the group until you left in 2007. What was that conversation like for you? Were you seeing that you would become the musical director, or was that something that you were just asked and took over?
It was all a weird, the way they used that. And again, I think it was Mike Love that said, Chris, we want to, we kind of want you to be the musical director. We want you to. And I'm thinking, well, there's nothing to direct. I mean, everyone knows the music, right? I always saw it more, they want me to be quality control, I kind of thought. You know all the vocal parts. You're a trained musician, so you can see them. You can see them in your head, when somebody's straying. So just keep everything so it doesn't go unraveled the way Carl did. So I never saw myself as the musical director, but, I'll take it. I'll take it. If I was on the hot seat, it's okay. If you guys want to call me that, that's fine with me. Again, however, right, we're there, however we can help. You want to put a name on it? No problem. He would turn to me, Chris, we're playing in Australia next week. There's 6 or 7 songs I want to include in the set because they were hits in Australia. So obviously he would know that I would get the band ready. So I guess that's musical director in a sense of I was the point man. Say, guys, we got to learn these 7 songs. Now, we've done them, some of them, some we never had. Yeah. We did a tour in England when I was with, they do it all the time, but we learned all those great album cuts from the late 60s and early 70s. All This Is That, Till I Die. And we got to perform those with the Beach. Wow. It's amazing. And so, we did a lot of work, but, and then somebody else, Scott Totten, he's amazing. Yeah. He knows his stuff too. It was great. He could just continue the high quality of the performances. I mean, that's just what we do when we're there.
Well, speaking of All This Is That, probably one of the greatest or underrated songs that they have in their the song book, and just to watch it on YouTube, see them perform at their 50th anniversary or whenever is a powerful moment. So I'm sure playing a song like that is powerful. But I'm really curious, and what I really wanted to ask you about is, putting together that set list. How much of it is what you want to put out there, but also what Mike wants to see put out as shown? Is there a hard thing to do there?
Mike Love is the master of set lists and pacing. He really is. And he created that set list more or less back in the 70s. And then Dean, when Jan&Dean toured with the Beach Boys for a few years in the late 70s, and then when they went off to do their own thing, Dean grabbed that set list too. I mean, he just knew it flows. Put the car songs together, make it a little set. Put the girls' songs together, the surf song, this and that. So Mike Love, and he always liked to tweak the set list, except when we're rolling, we're doing 30, 35 shows a month. No one, it's like, let's just leave it. We don't need to. But every once in a while, Mike would say, let's do a bunch of songs in a row. We might even do 6 or 7 in a row without a break, and then let the audience breathe. I'll say hello, and then we'll continue. I said, great. And then, but that one tour that we did in England was the only time I recall that Mike Love came to the band and says, guys, we're doing 2.5-hour shows in England for the next 3 weeks. There's a lot of songs over there that they really know that us Americans don't necessarily know. So bring me your wish list and let's put together a killer set. So that's what, we get to do this great album cut and that stuff. And I remember Al Jardine talking about the same thing. Hey, I'm going to go off and do my own thing. We're going to do all these great songs. Well, yes and no, depending on the venue.
Yeah.
You still give the people the hits. But over in England, the arenas we did and the theaters were just perfect for that stuff.
Sure.
So there's probably a set list posted somewhere, but it's just all the great stuff, the harmony stuff that we all love to do.
Is there a song or songs that you want to add that you didn't get to add that you wish you saw on the list, or was it generally you liked what was on there?
Breakaway. I would have loved to do Breakaway with the group. It's one of our, and now there's a vocal only thing floating around the internet that I heard about for years from some of the engineers. Chris, I've got this vocal. Somebody, we took out. It's just the vocals. It's amazing. It's amazing. I heard it once, but then now with YouTube and everything, it's all floating around. That would be one. I love that song. It's beautiful. One
of my favorite songs, and you've probably, I don't want to, make any assumptions. You've performed and with the Beach Boys. I'm sure John Cowsill performed as well with them. Is "Good Timing" off their LA album.
Sure.
One of my favorite albums ever. My favorite part is, I'm trying to think of what it is. It was like da. I forget what it is. It's like when they sing da 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 or whatever the part is. But it's one of my favorite songs in that album. And it's like I said, it's one of their albums or songs, and they have a lot of them that are underrated gems that they have. How often did you perform that song with the Beach Boys on tour? Good Timing.
Good Timing was performed a lot when John Stamos would join us for a few weeks every summer. He'd sing lead on it. So it's been thrown around.
Yeah.
Group. I got to sing lead on it kind of by default, unless someone else came in. So it's another great song. And I remember when we first added it to the show, when I was with him, Bruce helped with the vocals. It was Bruce and Carl. That's all those great backgrounds on that song. Yeah. And he was trying to remember which part was what. And when he came, one morning came and said, Chris, I remembered the fourth background part. I know what I did now, because that was 25 years before that.
Yeah.
So it was fun to be a part of creating that stuff for the live show. I said, Bruce, this was your arrangement, right? I said, yeah, I got to remember what we did. I got to remember. So we finally put it together the way the record was. And Bruce was a happy man because his memory was still there.
Well, Good Timing, that's a song, that Carl sings lead on. He wrote that with Brian. Is that when you're tasked with singing a song like that or another song that Carl had performed and you're saying that whether he's there or he's no longer there, is that, a big task for you to try to make sure you're not replicating, but putting your own twist on it?
I'd have to go to some of the other, guys that have been around longer and said, well, how do we find this song again? This was right when you could go to the internet and research, but you really couldn't. I had to buy all those twofers, right? The twofers. That's 30 years ago when those could all of a sudden CDs. You'd have two albums by the Beach Boys on one CD. And I'm like, thank goodness, because I was starting to learn and research the band. So I was kind of up to it by the time I was with them. But there's always that oddball song that you go, oh boy, I'm not too familiar with that one. I hope we can piece it together.
We might have mentioned this at the beginning when we talked about how life's been so far, but after you left the Beach Boys, you stayed busy with, your own music and CSI and the other groups you played with and Timothy B Schmit. How important is it for you to be staying busy since when you left the Beach Boys? Well,
the Beach Boys were so busy when I was with them doing, I don't know, 150, 170 shows a year. I love to be busy and I love to travel. So music is just perfect for me. I started my own musical services company. So I learned a lot from watching how Dean runs Jan&Dean, watching how Mike Love and the managers and agents run the Beach Boys. So I thought, shoot, I can put something together, field some offers, help whoever wants to work. Let's work. We'll do this configuration. It'll be a beach theme. Oh, they want a little 70s thrown in. And then Timothy Schmit just came out of nowhere. One of our buddies here is his guitar player. And he called me out of the blue and said, Chris, what are you doing tomorrow? And I was we were in St. Louis with Jan&Dean. I said, well, I'm flying home. from St. Louis. He said, well, what are you doing Monday? I said, I don't know, Hank. What am I doing? He said, come on up and hang out with me and Timothy. I think you'd be a good fit for our band. He just told me in 3 weeks he's got work. First time ever Timothy's done a solo thing. Wow. So you just never know where opportunities are to come. And I love traveling and between a few headliners that still call, say, hey, I'm working on this. If you could block it out, that'd be great. That kind of thing. Of course, with some of the main, and then the other shows that I book through my company. And then I'm a subcontractor on, I have Bobby a call. Hey man, we need you here. I'd love to have you. And I say, thanks for the invite. I'm good or I'm not. And we just go from there. Sure. So it's a wonderful little team that we've put together, and I'm very happy that to still be wanted out there.
Well, that I think that speaks to the magnitude of the Jan&Dean-esque Beach Boys world, where you have all these people who have performed with both groups or one or the other, and they're together even after they've left the groups, and they're performing the music still and keeping it going. And you don't see that with really any of the groups. You don't see the living members of KISS do that, or in these other groups who do this, that have had the amount of support that they've had. Now, I also wanted to talk to you about, because I've been listening to it, since we first got in contact a few weeks ago, and it's your album California Dreamin', with your songs you sang from the Beach Boys and the Beatles. I saw her standing there, and all these great songs on there. And to me, it reminds me of the album, the '85 album from the Beach Boys, that you might not have known it was out there, but then you listen to it and there's so many great songs that are on there. I love listening to Do You Want to Dance, one of my favorite Dennis Wilson songs off your album. Sure. Help Me Rhonda on there. Why Do Fools Fall in Love? And just a lot of great songs on there. And what I like about the Do You Want to Dance and Help Me Rhonda version is that, there are so many live recordings of Beach Boys songs that they sung. There's one from their 50 Sides of Summer, where it was a 95 version of Sail on Sailor. But there's none of Help Me Rhonda and Do You Want to Dance, that song like that. And I get that sort of vibe from Do You Want to Dance, where it's piano and you hear that, and it's not, the drum solo. And I love singing to it. I'm not a musician. I played saxophone for all of 5 seconds in middle school. There we go. I'm terrible. Never practice. I'm a shower singer. So when I'm in the car and I'm driving to Jamestown for my internship, this album and those songs have been in there. I can't fully reach the high parts of Why Do Fools Fall in Love, or some of the parts in When I Saw Her Standing There, but I try. But it's a great album. But my question is, after that long rant, when you're doing that by yourself as an artist, does that bring challenges to you when it's now you are in charge of it and you're doing this on yourself?
Well, half of that album was recorded with the current Beach Boys backup band. We went in the studio just to have something in the can, and we didn't finish up the vocals. So that album was kind of by default, where, well, I'm back in Los Angeles and all those guys are still on the road. Why don't I go in the studio and finish it up? And so, some of the vocals are the other guys, but I think most of them is me, if I remember right, just to finish it up and have something up there, just kind of a memento as for my time with the Beach Boys, because we would do corporates and we would do all those songs. Yeah, we would do a little song and a Summertime Blues, and that was the fun part of doing some of the private events where you could expand your set list a little. If you're doing a proper Beach Boys concert, well, of course, people want to hear the Beach Boys. Yeah. But in the corporates, they're not necessarily there. They just want party music, beach music, theme stuff. And so that's why some of those songs ended up there, and they were just fun to record, of course.
Well, I like the album. I listen to a lot of the songs on there when I'm driving to work, and leaving back. I really enjoy it. Now, before I let you go, and like I've said before, I appreciate your time and your patience and being able to do this and doing this with me and getting to this point. I want to end on a segment called the One Word Challenge. So for those who don't know what it is, what I do is I put together 5 or 6, even 7 sometimes, words or places or people that have something to do with my guest, and they have to do their best to come up with a word or two that best describes it. So, Chris, are you ready?
I'm ready.
First one, Livonia, Michigan.
Home.
Timothy B Schmit.
Wonderful.
The Bel Air Bandits.
Fun.
Los Angeles.
Great city. Oh, that's 2 words. Sorry. Great.
It's fine. And last but certainly not least, Chris Farmer.
Lucky bugger.
That's fine. Well, Chris, I want to say thank you. As I've said before, thank you so much for spending the time and doing this and letting me reach out and do this. It means a great deal for someone like yourself to spend the time with me.
Thanks again for the invite.
Well, as I always say, if you enjoyed this episode, because who wouldn't, and you're looking back 10 years from now and saying, holy crap, this was amazing, and this blows up like Joe Rogan, do us a favor, subscribe, follow, like, comment, share, all that fun jazz. It really helps. Chris, this is the time I give to my guests to let them plug, promote, and put anything out that they have. So is there anything that you would like to put out there?
It really is just my website if anyone wants to get in touch, if anybody needs some music. If for some reason you don't have the $200,000-$300,000 to buy the Beach Boys, I might be able to help you in that. A little bit. No, chrisfarmermusic.com. Very simple. CHRIS, farmer like farmer in the Dell, chrisfarmermusic.com. And there's a show schedule on there, and there's a bunch of things and the offerings, current offerings. Yeah. So it'd be great. Thank you.
If you'd want all the news and updates regarding the podcast, follow on Twitter, Nolan Carr Night, and on Instagram, Nolan Carr at Night Show. And in the words of Johnny Carson, I bid you all a heartfelt good night. And in words of another well-known man, especially the guest of today, thank you most kindly. And I'll see you next week for another edition. Take care.